you for listening to this episode of Changes Big and Small. This is your host, Damian. Changes Big and Small will help you take action in your life with intention and purpose. In each episode, I share unexpected challenges that will help you take action to live the life that you want. Last week, I shared a conversation with Sunitha Narayanan. Here is a quote from that conversation.
What we are trying to create in a conversation is heart connectedness, to truly lean in with 10% at least of willingness to say, I am going to enjoy this conversation. I am going to learn something new in this conversation. That way we have 90% to disagree with.
If you accept this and want to find the 10% connection, it is not necessarily easy. It takes practice. Before going into a conversation, especially a challenging one, think about the emotions that are connected to it. Name your emotions and acknowledge them for yourself. You may want to talk to a trusted friend to process your emotions as well. The goal is to be able to share your emotions in the conversation without being emotional in the moment. So take the time that you need to feel and process your emotions. Be careful not to carry your emotions into the conversation and not to let your emotions change into judgments, blame, or characterizations where you're making the other person be bad or where you're deciding that the other person was out to get you in some way. Don't try to control the situation. Being dictatorial rather than consultative will most likely cause the other person to shut down or to respond in a negative way. In a conversation, there are two sides, and it's as important to listen to the other person and find points of agreement with them as it is to share your own perspective. In a tweet by Adam Grant, he shared, saying that's a good point doesn't lose the argument. It wins trust. Acknowledging a valid observation is a display of respect. It signals that you're listening with an open mind and motivates them to follow suit. You don't have to agree on everything to agree on something. I remember this idea from his book, Think Again. In the book, he shares research that shows that conflict isn't necessarily a bad thing. The type of conflict matters. The goal is to have less relationship conflict, but more task conflict. Task conflicts allow us to challenge our assumptions and have difficult conversations. This is where learning happens rather than in agreeing to disagree. Task conflict is a disagreement about how to accomplish a particular task. And that's distinct from relationship conflict, which is more rooted in personality and personal beliefs, where you're making a personal judgment, where you just can't put aside your personal dislike of someone to focus on the task. If people have task conflict, they are able to figure out their approaches to that conflict to be able to find ways to work together. When it's personal, people shut down and they see things negatively. If you're focused on the task, then people can start to share their varying perspectives. Then it's possible to have a debate, to make some decisions. This allows you to be able to work together, even if you have a disagreement. You can make agreements about what to do when you have a disagreement, about a task or about how to accomplish a task. Adam Grant wants us to know that conflict and disagreement have a place in our development and in our lives. In a New York Times article encouraging kids to start fighting, Grant says, if no one ever argues, you're not likely to give up on old ways of doing things, let alone try new ones. Disagreement is the antidote to groupthink. We're at our most imaginative when we're out of sync. I've definitely noticed that some people shut down at the first sign of disagreement, while others thrive. I enjoy having conversations with people I don't necessarily agree with. I wonder what I'm going to learn. I have to admit, I'm not always as free of my ego as I'd like to be, But I don't consider disagreements in and of themselves as harmful to a relationship. As a matter of fact, I've become good friends with people that I initially disagreed with, and I have friends where we disagree on some ideas and agree on others. I see it as us having different stories, not as one of us being right while the other one is wrong. The key is to not personalize the conflict. So it's not you're a bad person or dumb or rude or unreasonable, etc., but rather being specific about the processes and behaviors that are points of disagreement. Here are 10 reminders to make it easier to have uncomfortable conversations and to navigate through disagreements. 1. If you're feeling uncomfortable, there is a good chance that another person in the conversation is as well. What can you do to make that other person feel comfortable? You might find that thing also helps make you feel more comfortable. 2. Leave room for reciprocation. If you notice that you're talking on and on, interrupt yourself to give the other person a chance to talk or to give them a chance to extricate themselves from the conversation. When we're nervous, we tend to repeat ourselves rather than live in silence. It's helpful to get more comfortable with silence. 3. If you want to talk about something specific, prepare the other person. Don't spring a difficult conversation on someone. You've had a chance to prepare and give them a chance to do so as well. 4. For non-casual conversations, give yourself more time than you think you need. This allows the ability to address each person's needs and to have time to empathize. 5. Figure out your conversational style and be explicit about your needs. Your needs can also change during the conversation. Don't be afraid to ask for time, space, etc. If you're getting tired or you notice that another person in the conversation is, take a break. Powering through is unlikely to be productive, as listening will most likely suffer. 6. Tease apart intent and impact. They are not necessarily the same thing. Be considerate of your impact and assume positive intent. This helps you see that someone else might not have intended a negative impact, and it gives you a chance to acknowledge the actual impact. This means that you can have grace for yourself and for the other person. If you need to, apologize authentically. That means leaving out the but. 7. Be genuinely interested and curious in the other person and in the way they think, especially when they disagree with you. Look for points of agreement to draw closer together. You don't have to be disagreeable in general, even if you are not completely aligned with the other person. 8. Share your emotions with people and give context of why you are feeling that way if it's appropriate. 9. Go straight to the source, one-on-one, directly. Avoid intermediaries if you can, and don't do it in a way that other people can pile on. Send a DM, request a call, follow whatever communication pathways are available. And number 10, empathize and support the other person. Don't switch the conversation to yourself or bring your own, often worse example of a situation when someone shares something. That is narcissistic behavior, and instead find a way to be there for the person and support. It's not a competition or Olympics about who has it worse. From my own personal experience, there are a couple of red flags. If someone is condescending to me or patronizing, basically if they say something that implies I'm stupid or inferior to them in some way, I speak up. I typically will not let that go unchallenged. As Adam Grant reminds us, when we try to convince people to think again, our first instinct is usually to start talking. Yet the most effective way to help others open their minds is often to listen. So again, we're back to listening. You can learn more about the different types of listening and the different steps in listening in the previous episodes this season. To end, let's talk about how to have a conversation with anyone. I know that has been a source of challenge for me, and I'm sure it's been for some of you as well. Some people find it really uncomfortable to be in different situations, unfamiliar situations. Last week, Sunitha provided lots of examples of phrases that you can use and shared how you can make your own conversation toolkit. It's worth investing some time into doing that. And there are also some tips that you can apply to any situation to be able to build connection with someone. You can pick up possible topics of conversation from the environment, or you can ask them for a recommendation or suggestion, or you can try to get the person to talk about themselves. Here are some examples of questions that can provide a model for you. How did you get here? How do you know the host? What do you think about the food, the lighting, the music? That's a really cool painting, instrument, etc. in your background. I'm curious to know more about it. This is very helpful on Zoom, for example, when people don't have blurred backgrounds and you can find a point or something to discuss. What do you like to do here? Where did you get that? Great atmosphere, great lighting. So many different things where you can comment and see how the other person responds. That can help you know if the other person is interested in having a conversation, and it provides a jumping off point to go into different or other conversational topics. Actively look for clues and commonalities in a person's environment or things that could help you get to know them better. Use context to decide what works and notice what sparks the user. One question I started asking in pre-interviews recently was, what excites you about the topic? Excitement is energizing, and I want to bring energy to my conversations. Come up with your own question that you could pull out in different situations. Something more interesting than what do you do? Because how many times do we do that, and how exhausting can it be to go through that conversation again and again in an environment? I don't enjoy traditional small talk because it often remains superficial. But what if we change that? What if we can get to know someone in a conversation by asking interesting questions, elevated beyond the weather? Here are some examples. What's the most interesting thing that happened to you today? Where would you rather be than here? Where would you be if you weren't here right now? If you're going to an event, you can prepare based on the type of event. Plan some questions that you think will work with the crowd, or some stories you'd like to share that you think might interest the type of people at the event. The challenging thing here is to go with the flow of the conversation. Save your prepared questions for lulls rather than trying to fit them all in. So often, and I fall into it myself, we miss a great opportunity to connect with somebody or a point that somebody made because we're thinking of our next question. It's not an interview. Lulls are okay and natural. They give the other person a chance to interject, to bring in their own questions. So leave space and don't feel like it's necessary to fill up every moment. After I had the conversation with Sunitha, one question that remained for me and something I wish I'd asked her about is the difference between virtual conversation and face-to-face conversation. I think that some of the same principles apply, but there are also differences. For example, in face-to-face conversations, we have a lot more information. We're listening in many more different ways because we're looking at people's body language. We're listening to intonation, pitch. We don't get all of that in video conversations or voice conversations. And definitely we get a lot less in text-based conversations. So as you go off and you think about the conversations you need to have and engage in different types of conversations, you might want to also think what is the best medium for the type of conversation you need to have. You may want to discuss with the other person that you're going to be speaking with to see if you have a chance to use a method that allows you more points of reference, more opportunities to listen. So going from face-to-face, video, voice, chat. Each of them have their different benefits and some of them work better for different people, but that's something to also think about as you have conversations that may be challenging and that may involve disagreement. enjoyed listening to this episode, please click on the link in the show notes to leave a review and share it with someone else who you think could benefit. If you have a question about relationships, you can email me at contact@changesbigandsmall.com. Remember, change begins with one small step. Have a great week.